Hey, I'm Sarah, this is Abby, and welcome to Azul Unlimited. If you're new here, I'm a scuba instructor, and I moved into my van in 2021 after losing my dive shop in Indonesia due to shutdowns. I've been on the road diving around the US, Canada, and Mexico for the last 2 years, teaching on YouTube along the way. Before we get into today's video, I just want to remind you that I have diving expeditions coming up. If you want to join me in KOMODO, BAJA, or SOCORRO, check out the details on my website and send me an email to reserve your spot. Let's get into the video. You just want to go back to sleep, don't you? People want to see you. Hi. If you've been following along for our adventures the last few years, you may have heard me talk about conservative dive planning for shore diving. And you may also know that I primarily solo dive when I'm traveling around in my van. And when I first started out, I was not making very much money. I was surviving on a very small budget, which meant that I didn't have all of the safety gear that I really needed. I'm making plans to spend part of my summer diving around Vancouver Island. If you've been watching for a while, during my dive dry road trip, I spent a tiny bit of time on Vancouver Island and I fell in love. I wasn't able to stay because I didn't have Starlink at the time. It was really hard to do any work at the cafes and stuff, so I just had to leave. But my plan is to explore Vancouver Island and share all of the places that I find, including, hopefully, God's Pocket. It's supposed to be some of the best cold water diving out there. I'm feeling more confident about this trip because Dan, which is Divers Alert Network, has set me up with some essential pieces of equipment, and I'm pairing them with some other items that are gonna make me a heck of a lot safer in the water. These are my plans as of right now, but I am currently in the process of something that could completely change all of that, and I will be announcing that in the next video, so stay tuned. If you're not subscribed and you want to know, that's coming up, and it's something that's very scary and very exciting. The first piece of equipment that I think every single diver should have, especially if they're shore diving, is an O2 kit. I know a lot of divers will just take a deco bottle with pure oxygen and that will be their emergency kit, but this dedicated O2 kit is perfect for me because it not only acts as my emergency oxygen, but it also is my teaching aid, because I do teach EFR, rescue, and emergency oxygen provider. So what I have here is a small bottle of oxygen with the regulator. And this is set up to have 2 demand valves and 1 continuous flow. The demand valve option is for anyone who is capable of breathing normally. This one is designed to be used with a mask, and sometimes these come with a specific mask that goes on this, but it can also be used on the pocket mask, which is great. You just have to make sure that this little inlet is closed. Okay, so that can be your demand valve. The other option is continuous flow. We have 2 options for masks on this one. First option is for anybody who is conscious and breathing, but just not well. Either one of these options I will be able to use as a solo diver, assuming that I am capable of putting all of it together. There is that. The final one is to use the pocket mask and connect continuous flow to the inlet. This allows us to give rescue breaths to someone who is not breathing, unconscious. The reason why this is so important for me is because I do tend to dive in places that are quite remote. So if something were to happen to me and I need to breathe oxygen or head to the hyperbaric chamber, before I was just kind of hoping that I would be okay enough to at least get to a phone and call for emergency care. If I wasn't capable of doing that for myself, I did have a safety net in place. I would let someone know, one of my friends or family members, that I was going diving, where I was going, my dive plan, and the expected time to hear back from me, along with my insurance information. The reason why this isn't great is because I would have to give a time out, give myself enough time to actually do everything. Realistically, if I do not check in at the time that I tell that person, by the time they're acting, I'm more than likely not okay. right? Like that's just the reality of it. I don't recommend this, and it's one of the risks that you incur if you decide to go solo diving, at least in a remote place, right? You could go solo diving in a very crowded dive site, and then you're at less risk of something happening to you, right? Because there are going to be people that notice that something's wrong, and you have divers on site who know what you're doing. What I have here is a small bottle, and this is good for about 20 minutes of demand valve breathing. I also have a larger bottle that's good for about an hour. Between the two of them, I have a decent amount of oxygen to get me where I need to go for more help, or to help me stay in one place while emergency services arrive. Very important. I know a lot of people that go shore diving and they do not have emergency oxygen, and I really recommend it. It's one of those things that you don't want to ever have to use, and you'll be happy you have it in case of emergency. Okay, the next thing that I'm always going to have is a first aid kit. This one is really great because it does come prepped with pretty much anything you could need. Really, the only two things I've added here are antibiotic ointment and some painkillers. The main thing, no matter what first aid kit you have, you need to be familiar with it. So spend some time, if you do buy one that's pre-packed, take it all out, look at everything that it has and how to use it. That way, if you're in an emergency, you're not like scrambling, trying to find stuff. You know exactly where everything is and how it works. The next thing, and this isn't something that you carry in your vehicle or with you as you dive, it's dive insurance. My personal choice, I've been a DAN member for many years, and I've had every type of insurance that they offer. So regular diving insurance, trip insurance, and now I also have the professional liability insurance through them. It's another one of those things that you hope to never have to use, but you're glad you have it if something happens. So if you're interested in looking at the coverage and plans, you can check out the different options with my link for Dan in the description below. Now we're gonna get to equipment that I carry while I dive. The most dangerous place to be as a scuba diver is at the surface, and that's mostly because of boat traffic. That's why in many places when you're shore diving, you should have a dive float and a flag. You may not need them in certain places because of the laws and the conditions, but in many places it is a requirement. A lot of times you can set it in the water and leave it for your dive day, and in other places you have to actually take the float with you as you dive. I have just a simple ball float with the flag. I find that it's useful for my lifestyle because it does pack down very, very small, so it doesn't take up a lot of space in the van. But my personal preference, like if I could have whatever and size wasn't an issue, I would go with the inner tube style float because it does have like a covering around it which acts as a bag when you're out on the water. You can open it up and leave things in your float and they'll be secure. The next item is an SMB. This is a surface marker buoy. My recommendation for the SMB is to go big. This one is huge, and the reason why that's really helpful is because if the weather changes and you're floating out to sea, there's large waves, you will be dipping in and out of visuals for boats around you. By having something that's very big, very bright, and this even has a reflective line down the center, you're increasing your chances of getting spotted at sea. I have in this little pocket my mirror, so let's see if I can catch the light here. So that can be a great signaling device. And then not visual, but audible. A lot of people will just attach this to their BCD, but I'm always moving from side mount to back mount and everything. And so I just wanted to have this in with my SMB because this piece of equipment goes from one to the other very easily. The other thing to carry with your SMB is a light. And the reason why this is so helpful is because, say, worst case scenario, again, you're floating out at sea. At night, you're not going to be visible. So having some sort of emergency light to attach to your SMB will make you visible at night. Very important. Never go diving without an SMB. Cutting devices. I like to have a line cutter right on my computer. So this is just a simple line cutter there. Okay, this is just razor blades, right, in a protective housing. And that lives on my computer so that I can easily access it. Another option that I really like are shears. These are great, especially if you know that you're diving in gear that is hard to get out of. It's much easier to rescue someone by just cutting their webbing and getting them out of their gear than trying to like maneuver the gear off of them. To me, that's one of the pros for having like jacket style BCDs, because they're very easy to get people out of if they need help. But with the trend of where things are going and everybody wants back plates and wings and side mount and everything, like it's good in an emergency, right? We only want to do this in an emergency because you ruin the webbing by cutting it, but this could be a lifesaver. And I've already mentioned it while talking about the O2 kit, but having a pocket mask when you go shore diving is very helpful because it helps you to create a good seal when giving rescue breaths. This also acts as a barrier for you so that you have less chance of contracting anything from providing rescue breaths. The last piece of equipment I want to talk about is a personal locator beacon or a satellite messenger. I'm saying either or because there are pros and cons for both of them, and I'm still deciding which one I'm gonna get. I'll have it purchased by the summertime, but let's talk through them. So a PLB, personal locator beacon, that is specific for emergency use only. You need help, so you set it off and emergency services are going to be deployed. The satellite messenger, on the other hand, has that capability, but you also are able to message back home if like your plans change. So like if something happened and I was going to be later than my normal back to shore time, I could open that up and text my person that's on land, right? My contact, and say like, hey, everything is totally fine. I'm just a little bit delayed. I'll be back on land in 20 minutes or something. That's kind of cool. That's an extra service, but it also comes at an extra cost. So with those, there's usually an activation fee, because of course there is, and then there's a monthly fee to use that service. I'm actually considering the satellite messenger option just because I am interested in it being an all-purpose tool that I can use in the backcountry, on the water, like wherever I am. And I think being able to message people when there's no cell reception and I can't have Starlink out, I feel like that might be a good option for me. I don't love how much it's gonna cost, but I think the peace of mind would be really nice. Between the two, the other thing that has me sort of leaning in that direction of the Garmin InReach 2 is the size. They have a specific dive housing and it keeps everything really compact. Whereas the PLBs that I've looked at, it sounds like I would need to get a canister and like shove this thing in the canister with whatever else I want to keep dry. And that would go into like my dry suit pocket or whatever. You have probably also heard of the Nautilus Lifeline. It's very popular for scuba divers. And I think it's a great product, like the idea of it. But again, for my purposes, I want it to be a multi-use item. The Lifeline is specific to sending an emergency signal to boats in the area. So if you want a tool that is specific for scuba diving and you know that there's going to be boats in the area, like that could be it. That could be the perfect solution for you, because if you get into trouble, you get to the surface, you open it, you send out the emergency signal, and the boats around you are going to get that signal and hopefully somebody can come help you. If you're like me and you want to start researching this stuff, you may also come across something called an EPIRB. And just so you know, an EPIRB is an emergency locator device, but it's specific to a vessel. So if you go out on a boat, the boat will have an EPIRB, or it should, right? All of the boats should have an EPIRB, but it's specific and registered to that boat vessel. Same with like a dinghy or something for rescue, it would have its own EPIRB. Then the PLB is for the people that can go onto your life vest if you happen to fall overboard. All of these options are designed to be able to withstand getting a little bit wet, but none of them can be activated while underwater. You need to come up to the surface, open up the dive housing, and activate it. If you have any of these devices and you have an opinion about it, please let me know in the comments below. I am going to purchase something very soon, and once I have it, it and have some experience diving with it, I will do a full review for you guys to let you know what I think. Having this necessary safety gear is giving me a lot of calm as I think about going into this next season of scuba diving from my van. And that's not to say that I'm going to stop being conservative in my dive planning, but it's going to give me a lot of peace of mind to know that I have more tools at my disposal to help myself if something goes wrong. So that's it. That's the video. I would love to hear from you to find out what is in your safety kit. Like, what do you carry with you whenever you're shore diving? If you want to get more from me and Azul Unlimited, you can join my Patreon community, or you can sign up for one of my super fun diving expeditions. I hope to see you underwater very, very soon. Okay, love you, bye! Get up.